guess who's back? It's me. I'm back after my hiatus for like a while, but it was for my education because, well, I was still doing school, but I went back to school in person and I kind of had to focus on that. Also, it's kind of hard to film in my room in Davis because I also don't have Wi-Fi in my room. Or I do, but it's like really weak, so it would also be difficult. Also, because I don't like want to be loud all the time. And like, anyway, but the point is, I didn't really have time or space to do Chalanting Pod when I was in Davis during winter quarter, so I'm so back for spring break now that I'm back at home. But yeah, like, where have I been? What have I been doing? Why was Chalanting Pod suddenly just gone for a few weeks? Like, I'm sure these are all questions that you guys have been thinking of for like forever. Like, wow, like where did she go? Like, so this is like my official like I'm back apology explanation. Like those YouTubers, like what happened to me, whatever. Anyway, this episode is gonna be super chill, super unstructured because I realized that like having the structured episode I think was fun, but also made the episode kind of harder and more confined. And also because I think I just had more time and energy in the beginning to make it really fancy, but I'm feeling kind of low effort. I just finished like winter quarter. Like this is going to be more chill and low effort because like I just kind of want to get the thoughts out, but it doesn't have to be super fancy or anything. Also, I'm kind of tired, and I'll talk more about that, like in the pod. But yeah, so it's been a minute and a lot of developments have happened. So honestly, I just wanted to kind of like yap it out, kind of just talk about what's been on my mind. Kind of the point of this podcast is honestly just for me to like yap and process things that are going on, kind of like share what just like has been going through my head or like what things I've been learning or like what I've been feeling recently and just being, chalant AF. So I can talk about whatever I want actually because this is my podcast. So actually like it's all chill. It's all being chilling. But yeah, like there's going to be no drink today because I already had copious amounts of dairy and caffeine. And I also don't have any means to make the drinks right now. But I did have a really good chai from, like, an iced chai from this place called Sana Cafe in, like, downtown Miami with my friend. And it was super cute. It was really awesome. Like, the chai was, like, very flavorful. And I think it's a Yemeni cafe. So that was fire. I'll count that as my drink of the episode, even though I drank it a few hours ago. It's still, like, in my system, so it works out. But I do have a song for the episode because the song has been, like, in my mind, like, for weeks. It's Hypotheticals by Lake Street Drive, I think. I might be wrong. Sorry. But that song has been in my head forever. I found this really good cover of it on YouTube, and I, like, loop it all the time. Like, I play every cover I can find of it. I listen to, like, an acapella cover of it. Like, anyway, it's just a really, like, happy, energetic song. It's very delusional, which I love, too. So, yeah, give it a listen. It's, like, pretty good. I would say, like, other music recs, since it's been a minute, I'll give you guys some more. When I was studying, I listened to, like, really intense, like, K-pop music because it just gets me, like, hyped up and, like, it's like a montage, like a study montage. I also listen to that when I get my blood drawn or get shots, and I'm getting my blood drawn tomorrow, so, that's a rec for myself. And I also found this DJ called DJ V, and she also does, like, K-pop mixes, like, R&B mixes, and they're great to listen to and study. I feel like it's, like, a homework study party sort of thing, gets me hyped. Oh, also, I'm gonna include more songs just because it's been a minute. Pauline Zoe Park, oh my gosh. I was put on during the Ivy Asian American Retreat. Her voice is so gorgeous. Her songs are so good. She only has 3 songs, which is criminal, but she's really good too, and I've been really enjoying it. It's, like, very healing. But kind of to give an update about what's been, like, like, going on in my life, it's been, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. I think it's calm now because no more school and I'm, like, home. But a lot of that, a lot of TikToking because I decided to get back into it, and kind of, like, become an influencer once again. If not, I'm not already influencing right here. But I decided to do TikToking. I made a lot of matcha lattes. I finished my tin of matcha, but I vlogged all of it, so I, like, capitalized off of the matcha tin. And then I've also been going to the Arboretum a lot because it's been more sunny. Like, genuinely, so healing. Like, I would just sit in the sun for, like, 10 minutes and touch grass. And it was, like, the most peace I've ever felt in, like, a minute. So I think that was really helpful. lots of matcha to cope, and a lot of essay writing for my two classes, and then for the end of the year, oh, lots of Molly Jasmine. I went 5 times. I went back to Davis. Um, but yeah, lots of things have been on my mind too, like about the future and about surgery stuff and like just all these thoughts. And that's what this episode is just gonna be about, like thoughts, updates from the past couple weeks. Okay, first update will be about surgery stuff. So I have thankfully moved to crutches now, and I am able to walk with even one crutch, like at home or like short distance, which is pretty good. Pain and fatigue, though, high, very high. And it's just logistically challenging to get around, is just like one of the bigger challenges that, boom, like as soon as I got Davis, I'm like, oh my God, like, wow, there's so many things I can't do. And it was honestly pretty demoralizing and kind of like I don't want to say frustrating, but kind of discouraging. That's like, wow, there's so many things I can't do, and there's so many logistics I had to go through. Even for like the mobility shuttle that I got access to, it's like you had to book it a day in advance before 5 p.m. And if I forget, I'm like, oh, I guess I just had to deal with it. But honestly, like the fatigue was something I didn't consider that would be such a big part of the recovery and going back to Davis. But the reality is, like, I was just so fatigued. Like, walking around crutches is no joke. All the planning and just like being on so many pain meds, just being in pain and like doing PT and all that stuff, it's like it adds up a lot. And the fatigue was just so real. I don't know what else was contributing to it, but it was so much more than usual. I was very forgetful. I lost my keys at one point, which really like frustrated me and stressed me out. I did end up finding it, bless, but you know, it was very stressful to like not have my keys, and it was at nighttime too. Um, but just also like just needing so much help, like needing help with chores, needing help with groceries, needing help with carrying things. It was definitely a challenge to ask for help, and I felt like really ashamed to like ask, or like I was just feeling really like embarrassed and kind of having this relationship with like help and disability and like whether they would offer or if I would have to ask. Honestly, it really related to like what I was learning in disability studies, ASA 189C, because a lot of it is about how like disability is constructed as like a burden societally, and like, you know, a lot of stigma about not being normal or needing to ask for help. A lot of it's influenced by things like capitalism, individualism, neoliberalism, all these like, you know, big concepts, but they also like can manifest in like these small interactions where it's like, oh, it's not normal to ask for help. It's not normal to depend on one another. But we learned this term called interdependence, and it's basically this idea. It's like it's like not the opposite of independence, but it's like we should normalize relying on one another and helping each other out instead of normalizing like this ideal of we had to be hyper independent. And it was a really awesome thing to learn about, because I was like, yeah, like we should all help each other out, and we do rely on each other because we're like people, and that's kind of how like our species is like a social species that rely on one another, and that's how our like society functions. So why are we like fooling ourselves that we can be super independent, and why are we feeling ashamed when we're not? Like everyone needs help, um, and everyone has needs, right? Some people have higher needs than others, especially if you're disabled, even like temporarily, like in my case. So it's like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. And if I'm willing to offer help, like yeah, that should be a norm, like caring for one another. And it sounds like really radical, especially because like that's not the world we have right now, but it's definitely something like I really believe in. And I think learning about that was validating, to know like, oh, like it's not like inherently shameful for me to ask for help because I can't do it and I need help. And I even had a challenge of thinking, it's like, well, I can do it, it'd just be really hard for me. And I had to realize, okay, yeah, that means you can still ask for help, because like if even if it's very challenging, that makes sense to ask for help. Like you don't have to just push through it on your own and like suffer. And I think there were times where I would still do that because I felt too ashamed, or I didn't feel like safe to ask for help. Like I felt like the people, like certain people, I didn't feel as comfortable asking for help. And there is some like boundaries where some help is a bit more vulnerable than others. Like I wouldn't ask for help with my laundry because it's like my dirty clothes. So that one I honestly kind of just stuck out on my own, even though some help would have been nice. But also it's like a bit more of a vulnerable sort of task. Or um like getting groceries. Like I feel like I did end up reaching out to people that I might not have known as well, and it's actually nice to kind of like meet new people through that. Like mostly people in university, but maybe people I haven't like done a one-on-one with. But it's also been more vulnerable because like you're grabbing groceries for me and like bringing it to my house. Like that's kind of like obviously I can't just have any like person that I don't trust sort of thing. But yeah, that was a lot to navigate is like feeling like I'm not doing enough because at the moment I'm disabled, or feeling like I had to make up for what I'm not doing, or feeling like just so disheartened that my functionality is so different, and then feeling frustrated because my fatigue was causing me a lot of like more issues, and just like causing just like like a lot of anxiety and like stress. I won't get too much into it just because it's like kind of a lot for me to like reiterate, and also because it was like kind of personal specific. But basically, a lot of this stress and anxiety kind of manifested in me living in my apartment, just feeling like really bad all the time because I couldn't do chores and I was making mistakes and being forgetful. And it was really hard to not be hard on myself because I just like felt so much like, I don't know, like shame and sorry, shame and like judgment. And I just felt like, I don't know, I think I just felt anxious and I wanted a lot of reassurance. And it was just really hard to navigate. And I think, especially because it's like my apartment, it was also hard because like I live there. But yeah, I think that was kind of the hardest thing, was just feeling a lot of anxiety for the first month being back in Davis. And I think honestly, still now, like that definitely has not fully resolved. I think the good thing that came out of it was I was in the end able to have like the conversations I wanted to kind of like resolve the anxiety, which is good. But yeah, it was just a lot being back in Davis. And I know everyone was going through a hard time. Or not like a hard time, but like everyone was really stressed out because winter quarter is such a beast. Especially like, I don't know, especially for a lot of people I knew, it was just really, really tough. And honestly, it did kind of teach me a lot about like capacity, boundaries, and kind of like where people are at. And I think it's something I also had to kind of encounter and learn while being at home, maybe in a different way. But I think at Davis, it was a lot of understanding like my limits and also other people's limits, and also understanding everyone comes from like a different place. So it's like trying to meet together and like understand both of those like differences in like background and communication styles and expectations. And um yeah, like I think with the limits, like with surgery, like physically I am limited, so I have to like, I'm forced to kind of respect my capacity. And honestly, like with this, and also with my disability studies class, which I love and I will always reference because it truly like taught me so many things, is I realized for a long time I really denied myself capacity because it felt like I didn't have a real reason to excuse myself or like justify myself or like just respect and validate my own capacity. So I would often outdo my capacity because I was like, oh, well, I'm better than this. I'm more than just my capacity. I can push through it. Like, I can be responsible. I'm going to prove that I can exceed, right? There's like this expectation to exceed expectations or exceed your capacity to like do better and like outperform or whatever. But it was mostly like this standard of trying to push myself and try to like be excellent and kind of like prove myself sort of thing. And it also just came from like a sense of responsibility. Like, especially I noticed in like student council, I would really push myself past my limits because it was like what I should do, what's responsible, and like what's good for like the betterment of the school or ASB or whatever. And especially like in a leadership position, I feel like it's like, yeah, you should sacrifice for your team, or like, I don't know, like sacrifice, but like push yourself for your team and like put in 110% of the work, right? And that was a lot of my motto, like when I was like a few years back in high school. But honestly, like I'm realizing like now that I mean, I've had these before, like I've had this sort of like limit to capacity before. And to be super honest, like I've always had that due to like maybe more invisible disabilities, right? That I may have just not respected for myself, or may have not even validated with myself because it was not validated by others because it's invisible or just like denied. But with like a physical disability, like I literally just like can't. Like I literally cannot. Like I could try, but then I might hurt myself, or like I don't have the hands for it, I don't have the strength for it, I don't have the balance for it, right? Like on crutches, I'm like in a precarious state, right? So I had to realize, wow, like I really can't just push through and depend on myself and just do it. Like I literally am physically like limits, right? But it also made me realize too, like in disrespecting my own boundaries, I also kind of projected that onto other people. And I was like, well, why can't they just do what I do and like push through and blah, blah, blah. But I realized it's because I didn't respect my own capacity. So I didn't respect other people's capacity because I put that invalidation onto other people. I think I don't want to be extreme though. I'm not saying like I never like understood people where they're at. But I think, and I think I'm now more open-minded and like more understanding. But I think I was reflecting on like years back, there was this kind of sentiments like, well, I'm pushing through it, so like everyone else should. But in this disability studies class, it's kind of realizing like, wow, a lot of these ideals are very, very capitalistic, individualistic, and coming from this notion of like worth from productivity, worth from pushing your own capacity, and like realizing like, wow, our capacity is really limited. Like, I thought it was this bigger thing, like it should be bigger, and that's because obviously I grew up in this very hyper capitalist competitive space where that's normalized, like yeah, do more and more. But I realized, well, okay, it feels like I discovered it, but like I've come to grow into understanding that that's not natural, that's not normal, and I think I knew that the whole time. But from like a disability studies lens, it's like we need to like structurally recognize that humans' capacity is not this imagined ideal of hyperproductivity, hyper-availability, just be pushing past physical, mental limits. Like, that's not good for us, and like chronic stress and like all that stuff. I'm like, wow, that makes so much sense why we are all feeling so like unwell. I think what like really like flipped the switch is we had this reading, and we also had the author of the reading come and talk to us, Mimi Khúc, and it was this reading called um she actually I don't remember what it's called, like Letter to Elia, like Asian American Unwellness. I don't remember the exact name of it, I'm so sorry. But basically one of the main one of the main takeaways from the reading is that we should assume unwellness, especially in the context of like the university and Asian American students in university. Oh my god, that reading, and like we also listened to like an interview podcast about her reading. Oh my god, it was like life changing. It was like very transformative, like things I did know from my own experiences, but she just like put words to it, and it was so like validating. Like she had this experiment or this like activity where we wrote about what does unwellness look like and what does wellness look like, and she compared it to how administrators in colleges responded versus how students responded. So for unwellness, it was like people were pretty real. They're like, depression or feeling really sad and tired, exhausted, burned out, crying, crashing out, whatever, right? And then for wellness, a lot of the students were like peace, happiness, touching grass, seeing the sunshine, listening to music, being with friends, being community. I'm like all these, things that you feel inside, like, wow, that is wellness, and like things that you deeply desire. And honestly, that activity was very eye-opening to realize how many people are unwell and what people long for. Like, even it was a little sad to hear what people wanted for wellness, because like, wow, we're like so far from that, even though those things should be like, available, like sunshine and grass and happiness and peace. Like, wow, like those shouldn't be things that are like impossible to reach. But Mimi Khúc was basically bringing up the idea of like, well, the university is not intended to make you well by those standards, right? And she was bringing up the administrator's version of unwellness and wellness. And unwellness to them is like drugs, alcohol, bad grades, not graduating, like all these very like rigid kind of university standards of achievement. But their wellness like standards were like good grades, graduation, academic achievement, like being able to bounce back from like setbacks, like all this very kind of like almost like capitalistic kind of academic standards of wellness that are more about performance and how you like actually feel. Like compare that to like the sunshine and grass, like, right? And her point is like, yeah, universities are not trying to, like, they're meant to make you unwell, right? Like think about it, they're not forgiving, they're pretty harsh, they expect a lot from you. They're trying to make you good workers, not healthy students, right? And I was like, wow, oh my god, like I know that university students are unwell. Like there's tons of jokes of it, like on TikTok and Yik Yak and whatever, right? Like we all know we're like crashing out, need to log in, whatever, right? But like, if you really think about it, it's like, damn, like we're all like miserable, depressed. Like, shouldn't that be like a sign that like something is wrong. But then we all have to, not like have to, but we all go down it and we just see it as normal and we see it as like what's necessary to get through. And but at the same time, we also don't assume unwellness. We like assume people are doing well, and we kind of hide the fact that we're not doing okay, which makes care not normalized and makes that rare or like shameful. And when I heard that, I was like, damn, like she spoke. But she was also saying, like, if we recognize unwellness and we're real with ourselves and real with other people, and we're not pretending we're okay, that is a step first in recognizing your unwellness instead of just hiding from it. Because, like, in hiding it, like, how are we even going to, like, address it if we, like, deny or, like, hide? And she also brought up, like, in recognizing that we're all unwell, then care becomes, like, a normal thing, right? Because if we're all unwell, then it is the assumption to care for one another and assume unwellness and like assume generous understanding and empathy instead of, oh, you're fine, and then having to be proven to be unwell. And that honestly like changed like so many things. I was like, boom, like whoa, right? So I think I definitely understood like the mindset of like, yeah, everyone's going through something, but I think the way she explained it just kind of like flipped something in my brain, like fundamentally. It's hard because like I did like, I'm not like I never believed that and now I do, but it's like just my perception was able to like solidify from that like so much. So I think like applying that to like myself and others, like I've definitely been able to kind of respect both my own capacity and others' capacity, real like assuming unwellness, right? Assuming my own unwellness, assuming others' unwellness. And also it like it's kind of hard because you don't want to be like, well, yeah, everyone's unwell, like it doesn't matter, like sort of thing, because that's also kind of not it. And you're not like glamorizing unwellness or being like, I want to be unwell or I'll never be well. Like that's like not it. That's like I don't think that's like the goal, right? And it's kind of complicated because all of us want wellness, right? But I think understanding that that is hard to achieve under a system that is not built for that is also validating, because it's like, okay, what's a good analogy for this? Like if you're trying to be dry in a pool, but you don't understand that water makes you wet, then you're like, why the freak am I not dry? But then if you understand, it's like, oh, it's because I'm in the freaking pool and the pool's gonna make me wet, then you're like, oh, that makes sense why we're not dry. We need to get out of the pool, or like, I can't think of a different way to do this analogy, but we need to get out of the pool if we want to be dry. And I'm not saying this is me like drop out of university. I mean like we need to like change the system. We need to be in a different system for us to be dry or well, right? But if we're trying or to pretend to be well or just trying to be well within that system, it's going to be difficult. And I don't think it's not achievable, but it's like we need to understand there's like real reasons why we're unwell. Like there's real reasons contributing to that, and that's valid, right? It's not all in our heads. Like there's real things going on that are making us unwell. But it's also like okay, it's weirdly comforting and validating, because I always have this thought in my head, is like, when am I going to be well? When am I going to be happy? When am I going to be peaceful? When am I not going to be stressed? And it's like this pressure. It's like, why are you unwell? Why are you unwell? But honestly, it was like kind of comforting for her to be like, we should assume unwellness. Because I'm like, damn, then I'm not like abnormal for feeling unwell. I'm actually normal for feeling unwell. And that's honestly a really like different take than some like mental health like perspectives, where it's like feeling unwell is like deviant, right? Or mental disability is deviant. And that's all you learn in like disability studies too. It's like, or the challenge, like what disability studies is challenging, right? It's like being unwell, being disabled is like deviant. But when you understand like mental health from that perspective, it's like, it's not like you're crazy. You're not abnormal. You're not insane for being unwell. There are real reasons contributing to that, and it makes sense. Doesn't mean we want you to be unwell, but you don't have to pretend, and it's not you. It's not like you're alone. Like you're the only one who's struggling. It's like a collective understanding and like a systemic understanding of unwellness, especially like Asian American unwellness, which she dives more into. And I thought that was very, very validating and very real. It hit very close to home. So I think like that's definitely something that I've like really internalized from the class. And I'm like really, really glad I was able to take this class and like take that in. I think another unlearning thing from the class, like the disability studies class, was about like shame and like disability shame and something called compulsory able-bodiedness. So compulsory able-bodiedness is it's not like compared to, but it parallels to compet or compulsory heterosexuality. And it's basically this idea of like this imagined idea of like a hyper productive, hyper abled person, and you feel like you have to reach that standard. You have to act okay or be productive or be able, but that like standard will never be met because it's like this impossible standard for a human. So I feel like that was something that really like resonated in me. I'm like, oh wow, I have felt this compulsion to always be able, to always be available, to always be capacitated or like productive. And I think that does come from a very capitalist idea that like desires that and requires that to some extent for survival. So I think it really, really played into my desire. Like, I have to be able, I have to be able. And when you're not, you feel like this shame, right? This shame and stigma of not being able. And I feel like this class kind of gave like the language and also the like structural understanding of this shame, like both on like, right, it happens at a structural level of how disability is stigmatized and shamed through like laws and discrimination and the capitalist idea of having to be able-bodied to work, like all these structures seeing disabled people as a burden, seeing them as deviant, like all these like big structures happen on like a micro internal level where it's like, oh my gosh, I can't take out the trash, I feel so bad about myself, I feel so ashamed that I can't do this, you should be doing more, you're a burden, you are burdening other people, to understanding like, okay, first of all, like let's take a step back, right? Why do you feel that way? Why do you feel like you always need to be able? Why do you feel like you always need to be productive or help out, right? It's like, oh, well, I don't want to be seen as a burden. I don't want to be seen as a problem. And it was like a lot of this thinking, I don't want to be a problem, don't want to be a problem. But it's like understanding with disability studies, it's like disabled people are not the problem. The problem is inaccessibility. The problem is discrimination. The problem is viewing disabled people as deviant or burdensome. And it's being very intentional with like, first, we all need care, we all need to depend on each other, we all need to help each other out in different ways, we all have different capacities, and that should be respected because that's just how we are. Like, that's, if you run out of capacity, like that's it, right? It's not a moral thing, it's just like how it is. And also this understanding of like, you don't need to work or be productive to be valuable, to be loved, to survive, to have housing, to have food, right? And it sounds really radical, but at the same time, you're like, yeah, like, I don't think anybody should like be on the streets or not have food or not have love because they're disabled, right? But it's a lot of unlearning. And even like, I recognize like I have a lot of privilege, right? Like, right now, this disability is technically temporary. Like, I have a lot of financial support. I have very supportive friends. I have a network of people. Some of my disabilities are invisible. So I recognize I have like a lot of privilege. I'm also in like a state that is a bit more liberal. Not to say California is perfect, but I can recognize that I have like a lot of privilege. But even with that privilege, I can still recognize that those systems exist and still affect us. Like, even if I have all this privilege and I'm still affected, then obviously it's going to affect people who don't have those privileges even more. And it also speaks to the fact that another thing we learned is like, even though not everyone's disabled, and there's a lot of conversation about what counts as disability or not, like how it's defined, but the more important part is like, even if you're not disabled or considered disabled, or you're temporarily able-bodied, which is another term, you're still implicated within ableism. It's like all those big structures and understandings that fuel ableism, right? You're still implicated within that. So even if you're like considered able-bodied or you have a lot of privilege, it's still within your best interest and also within your responsibility to challenge ableism in any way you can. And I thought that was also really important to learn about too, because there's also this understanding like, well, I'm not blank enough to, feel this, or I'm not blank enough to advocate for this. But it's like, none of us have to be blank enough to believe in these ideals or to challenge a lot of the status quo or to advocate for deconstructing these like harmful systems. Okay, that was a lot, but speaking about dismantling structures and whatnot, and thinking about like the future, that's definitely something that's been a lot on my mind. I think it's always on my mind, like the future, because I think I'm just like a forward thinker, sort of planner sort of energy. But there's definitely a lot of anxieties about the future. I think the most notable one is like social political state of the world. Like, honestly, I feel like I've been more disconnected because of the other anxieties that I've had that I haven't had, like, I don't know, the processing like space to take it all in. I think I've been kind of dissociated, kind of like observing but not really being able to like process the emotions. But I think with the future there's a lot of anxiety because of like Trump being in office, but also because just this isn't just because Trump is in office. Like I think I've always had these worries, like, oh my god, we're so screwed in the future. Like, what are we going to do about like climate change? What are we going to do about all this like political violence? Like, how are we going to turn this around? Like, there's just so much suffering. Like, I don't even know if I can do anything about it. Am I doing enough? But it's not just about me, it's also about these structures, but they're so big. Like, am I even going to live to be an adult? Am I even going to make it to 30 or 40? Like, all those very scary, doomist kind of thoughts. And obviously, as an like ASA sociology major, I read a lot about like colonialism and injustice and oppression, and it's like very, very disheartening because it's like, oh my god, these systems are so big, they're so extending, they're so violent. How can we even begin to deconstruct this? And again, I come from a place of extreme privilege, and I think it's like I can recognize my own privilege and want so badly to change it. And I don't know really where I'm going with this, but it's like I recognize how much privilege I have, and I want to use the like resources that I have access to do something good. And I guess it kind of makes that expectations like you have so much to give and you should be giving more and you're not giving enough, or like you have to just like a lot of not like pressure but like a lot of um weight on what I am to do with my future, even just like small things. And I think it's hard because when things are as bad as they are, it's a lot harder to like you can't just like forget about it, or like I can't just move on, right? It's always going to be there. Um and yeah, I feel like I'm being kind of vague, but that's to be honest because the issues are so like overwhelming to an extent that it's kind of hard to be more specific. But speaking of the future, I think it also relates a lot to my career. My career, I really like I don't have a clear idea of what I want to do, and whenever people ask, I get really nervous, even if I don't know like which job I want. I know I want to do something that advances social justice in some way and like really try to commit to that. I think when I was younger, I wanted to be the freaking president of the United States, which is kind of a crazy dream job, and also that was very delusional. And I'm also not interested in working in government anymore. But it just feels like I want to do so many things, but I know it's not just about me, it's about like collective work. But it just feels so like daunting. It's like, wow, I really want to be part of organizing and movements and, you know, doing my part to kind of chip away at this entire like mass of injustice, right? But it just feels so like daunting. It's like, how can I do that? Like, I feel like I'm gonna burn out. I feel like I'm never gonna be enough. I know, again, it's not about me, but right, I can only control what I do, and that's really difficult to like grapple with. Um, and I did actually get an internship with this organization called Seeding Change. It's an Asian American organizing internship for youth, and it is pretty exciting. I'm a little scared because I'm just so new to it, and I feel like this feeling again, I'm like not enough. Like I feel like imposter syndrome. Like who am I to be part of this? I know I'm there to learn, but it's still kind of scary. But I hope that's like a step in the direction. And I think what I can at least find, I don't know about comfort, but strength in is that one, I feel very grounded in my values, and I think that's really important that I'm there. Like I'm learning things through Asian American studies and social. I'm actively learning, educating myself, becoming more and more informed, more and more critical, more insight. Like even with disability studies class, like so much of my like perspective has changed, right? Like just with one class. And like another thing too is I know that those values do shine through even if it's not materially. Like even if I'm not like in this position of political influence, or even if I'm not actively volunteering or actively sending out material goods to people or actively lobbying or advocating, like at the place I'm not doing that right now, right? My main things on my plate are school and university and trying to be healthy and try to figure out my surgery stuff, right? but I know that they shine through in like my other actions and my way of being as a person, trying to be community oriented, reaching out to people, staying connected, um, like talking with people, showing my support, and just doing what I can and trying to show my values in like real life. I feel like I know that's a really valuable part of me and my actions, and I know that it is helping at least in some way, and like I feel like that gives me hope that it's like what I'm doing is important, and wherever I go, I think I'll be able to like make an impact and kind of like follow my values, if that makes sense. Oh my god, that was pretty heavy. I'm not gonna lie, it's still very anxiety inducing to think about the future and like my future career and all that other stuff, and just like even like, oh, I applied for the cross cultural center and I find out about the job on Friday and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm super scared because if I don't get it, I feel like I'm screwed. And I still have anxieties about even like short term future things like next quarter, my classes, and like also things like finances and the summer and time passing very fast. Like that's very scary. Like I'm gonna be 20 in June. Like what the heck? Um, but also another thing that I wanted to bring up too was like in terms of putting the two topics I'm talking about, shame and the future, together. I did kind of already touch on it, but I had this conversation with a counselor I see at Davis about feeling kind of the shame about how much I'm doing. I think in a more LinkedIn capitalist sense and less than in a social justice activist sense. It was just a conversation about how I feel like I'm not doing enough resume wise. Like, oh, I don't even have anything going on for me. Like, freshman year, I was just trying to figure things out. I didn't really have any established. Second year, I'm just doing university. I had the surgery, right? Like, I feel like I'm set back. And compared to, like, some of my other friends who are, like, such girl bosses or, like, whatever, like, I feel like I'm behind and I feel like I have nothing to show for myself. Like, even though I feel confident in a lot of my abilities, I don't have anything to show for it. So I feel like I am not doing enough and I'm behind and, like, washed up in a way, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not meeting the expectations or potential that other people might have for me or that might even have for myself. Like, I'm like, why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you more involved in this? And then just feeling like all this comparison and like envy. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is a whole thing. And I kind of brought it to like counseling to kind of talk it out. I think what was really helpful is that like the counselor that I was talking to, she was able to kind of like walk me through the process. And I kind of ground me in my own value, because she was like, okay, like what do you actually want though, right, from college? Like what are you actually going for? And I was like, well, yeah, when I got to college, I realized I didn't want to girl boss so close to the sun that I would burn myself out and be miserable like I did in high school. I also had no social life in high school, and I really did not like my life. So when I got to college, I was very intentional about how I wanted to do things. I wanted to have a balanced lifestyle. I wanted to sleep. I wanted to eat 3 meals a day. I wanted to go to the gym or go to the arc. I wanted to be able to see the sun, right? Do all these things that were good for my mental, physical health. I also wanted to build a community and have a vibrant social life, because that's something I desperately lacked in high school and years before. And I knew it was a good opportunity. Like college is a place to meet so many people and kind of make that community. So obviously I'm going to take advantage of that. Obviously I'm here for my education too, but it's like I'm not going to let my grades or whatever, like I'm not going to stress on my GPA, because I want to focus more on the things that are like real, like getting experience, exploring what I want to do. Like those things are like important for my future. It sounds irresponsible to be like, oh, I don't care about my grades, but the reality is like for Asian American Studies sociology, the more important thing is learning. First of all, like I care more about learning than grades. Making connections, finding community, finding your network, and getting experience. So I'm gonna focus more on that than like, just studying and like taking classes. So it's like, okay, on that end, should I be taking more classes? No, because my intention is not to. And then it's like, should I be doing more extracurriculars? I mean, maybe, yes, that was like my intention to do that. But also, I wanted to find an extracurricular that I like and that is good and like not overworking me or anything, like ASUC or something. I wanted to find one that aligns with my values, and I wanted to find one that would advance me in my career or benefit me in some way, right? So that's why there were so many opportunities that I saw that I could have gone for that I didn't, because I wanted to be intentional with my time, and I also only gave myself a few slots for like what I'm going to do. So I can do university, school, and one more thing, and then the other time is for my free time, social time, time for me to like maintain my life and do my laundry and get groceries and stuff, right? So I was very intentional with that. So I am actually reaching the goals and intentions I want to. Um, like I'm not kind of like settling and I'm going like depth over breadth is kind of how the counselor put it. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess when you put it that way, I'm not doing too bad because I am following my intentions and my values and my goals. And even if I don't have things on paper to show for it, like even if my resume is like not super stacked or whatever, like I know I still have these skills. I'm still learning, I'm still growing. I'm doing what I have intended to. Like I am growing a network. I am meeting people. I am like finding a community, and that's actually like amazing because that's what I wanted for so long. Like I crave this community and this connection, and like wow, I feel like I have it, and that is such an accomplishment and something I should be proud of. Even if it's not on a resume, it's still worth celebrating because why is the only thing of value on your resume or on LinkedIn or whatever? And I think I still have like the voices, like the LinkedIn mentality, the Pally mentality, whatever, of like you're not doing enough, you're not reaching these standards. And like especially when I talk to people with that mentality, it makes me feel so bad about myself because like for example, I was talking to like one of my mom's friends and she's the kind of like LinkedIn energy, Paul to energy. And I told her about the internship that I got into and I explained that it was unpaid because there's not a lot of funding and money when it comes to Asian American organizing, unfortunately. Um, and she started sending me like other internship opportunities, but I already committed to this one. So it kind of sounds like when you bring over like your partner and then your mom like doesn't like them, so they start giving you other options to date other people, and you're like, bro, we're already like committed. Like what are you trying to say, right? So I was just like, okay, I was scared to bring it up because I knew she wouldn't think it's good enough. But I had to like ground myself and be like, okay, this is something that I really value. I really value the like mission of seeding change, and I really respect their politics. I really respect and align with the work they're doing. So yeah, I'm really happy I'm part of it, and I'm glad I got selected. Like what an accomplishment. And I'm nervous, but I'm also and like scared, but I'm also excited to work with it because I feel like it'll be really pivotal in like things. Yeah, but I kind of wanted to talk about that too because I felt like it was a good mindset shift. Okay, I think the last thing I wanted to touch on was that in terms of like boundaries, limits, like this is sort of the theme: shame, boundaries, limits, the future. I also have kind of come to the place, and I think I've been developing this sort of like mentality for a while. It's not just like a immediate thing, but I'm kind of coming to the place where I want to be more intentional with my like time and energy. And this is something I really realized with getting surgery. Like as soon as I got surgery, things were so different. Like I had no filter because I was on a lot of pain meds and I just had such low capacity that I had to be very intentional with saying no to things that I would have usually said yes to and not overextending myself and being very selective with my time and energy and, you know, but I think even though I'm not in the same state I was when I first got surgery, I still have the mentality of, I want to protect my own peace and um, respect my capacity and invest my time into things that I think are, valuable and worthwhile instead of like extending myself into things that are very draining and kind of like putting boundaries and like intention into my relationships. It makes me sound like a very cold, distant person, be like, I'm not putting energy into our relationship. But the reality is, like, I'm not going to kind of extend myself past kind of what I have. Okay, I'm being super vague, but it's like, I'm gonna put in the energy that I think is appropriate for this sort of relationship. And I'm also gonna be like real. Like, if I'm not, like, during surgery, right, I wasn't really comfortable with everyone coming to my house and my room because it's a very, like, private, vulnerable space. And also, it's very vulnerable seeing me in kind of like this more incapacitated, like, I'm like kind of high on drugs, right? So I would be very intentional with who I wanted to visit my room. And there were times where I was less intentional about it, or like there was a time I invited someone over and they also invited someone else and I didn't really know and I was a little bit uncomfortable. But I think it's just like now knowing it's like, okay, I should be more clear with what I'm comfortable with and not comfortable with, and that should be respected. And I can respect myself with that, and I think other people can too. And it's also just like I have very limited time, for example, too, with like who I see. And it's also reevaluating, like, are these people I want to stay friends with? Again, not in a mean way, but it's like, if I feel like my values don't align with you, like, or I just feel like this friendship is being more draining than not, I don't have to force it. I don't have to invest so much energy to try to make it work. I can realize it's just not compatible, not working, maybe just not what I need, and just go to other people to either like maybe talk about this issue or just invest my time in people who I know got my back or who I find like so much fulfillment and value in being friends with. So yeah, that was definitely something I was like coming to terms with more and being more real with myself. And I think that's a really good step, and I'm proud of myself for getting to that point, because it's definitely like knowing myself better, and it's also like I would say more ingenuine to keep trying or just like keep just like going with whatever with a relationship when you're not feeling it, right? Like, I don't know, like I would rather be more in tune with what I actually feel than kind of just like forcing myself or like pretending. Because there are times I would hang out with people that I'm maybe not as comfortable with, or that I don't know. And there's nothing wrong with hanging out with people you don't know as well. Like, there's like growth in a relationship, okay? But someone I'm maybe not as comfortable with, but I feel like I'm forcing myself to be more vulnerable than I'm ready for, or I feel like I have to pretend and be someone else that I'm not. And that can also just be a compatibility thing, right? It's like, there's like getting to know someone. There's also like just feeling like you can not really be on the same page, and then you feel like you can't really be yourself. So I feel like that's something I'm really coming to like, sorry, oh my gosh, understanding with. Okay, last thing I want to reflect on is kind of about this journey with like shame and like unlearning shame, because that was actually my New Year's resolution. Well, my one of my less practical, like less tangible ones was to work on unlearning shame. And I think there was a lot of progress that was made, like especially with my surgery. One thing that was that was kind of funny is like, because I was so incapacitated for so long, especially like with all the pain meds, I kind of became comfortable being like maybe more unhinged or just kind of saying whatever comes to mind. Obviously with some limits and reason, but I kind of just like say whatever, and it's like kind of freeing to be able to just like say what's on my mind. Again, not in like an untactful way, but just in like a funny way, like just rizzing people up is like low-key kind of fun. As long as that doesn't make people uncomfortable. But it's like, I don't know, it just like I'm just funnier. Like, that's real. I'm just so hilarious, and like surgery just made me stronger, you know? But like I feel like that's something that I was like, oh, that's like really cool. Like I can just make these jokes and I don't feel like so much anxiety about just like expressing myself and being loud and being funny or whatever. But I think there's definitely still like the shame that manifests in other ways, like with the asking for help and receiving help, and like needing reassurance, and anxiety and shame about this like temporary disability and whatever, right? Like I think that's still the case. There's still like obviously shame about like myself, or like the way I present, or like you're so weird, or like social anxiety kind of things from the first episode. Like that definitely hasn't gone away either, and you know, it's still something that I'm working on. But yeah, it is nice. It's like already March, right? So I'm like, oh crap, like the year has kind of passed fast. And I'm like, oh, you haven't made any progress with shame. And then it's like, well, it's going to take a while. I definitely think I will see improvement by the end of the year, because I think I just grow so much every year, especially like at this point in my life in college. Like even reflecting like 1 year ago, last March, I'm like, oh my god, first of all, how has it been 1 year? That's not real. But also, wow, I was a completely different person like last March. And I don't know, that gives me some hope that like, hey, next year or by the end of this year, there's so much progress that could be made that you might not anticipate. And that does make me happy. Like, I think I do focus on like, there's so many things that I haven't been able to change yet, and so many things I feel like I still have to work on that are still left over, or like still going on from last year. So it can be discouraging to be like, you're still struggling with this, you're still struggling with this, and like, you know, it's kind of disheartening. But also, wow, you've changed so much in 1 year, you've learned so many things. Like all those things that I was just talking about, I'm like, wow, I did not think that a year ago. Like all those amazing cool thoughts about like, yeah, you're grounded in your values, like you don't have to worry about other people are doing, you're not playing that game, or like you have like limited time and you can respect your capacity and you can raise people up without any shame. I'm like, that's crazy, because 1 year ago I would have not said that at all. Or you're making a podcast and you're letting people follow it. Like, that's crazy, because 1 year ago I wanted to make a podcast, but I didn't let anybody follow it because I was too scared to have anybody see what I was thinking. But now I'm just putting this on YouTube. So, like, growth. and I'm like comfortable just like talking how I talk and putting it on the internet. So like, let's go, right? But yeah, those are a lot of my thoughts. I realized I was yapping for like a really long time, but that's not a bad thing. Sorry, not sorry. I'm not even gonna lie. I might just post this unedited because I don't have the energy to edit this that much, and it's like more raw and unfiltered. It's like more chalanting, you know, like it's just like more authentic to like who I am, not because I don't want to edit. But I think it's also probably funnier that way. I'll probably edit a little bit, but like not that much. This is the real me. This is exclusive content if you made it to the end. Like, you're an exclusive watcher of the chalanting pod, and you should be so proud of yourself because you're just so like hot and gorgeous. So so you've earned the riz. But thank you so much for watching. Much appreciated to my dedicated fans. And yeah, I hope you have the best sleep of your life. Or if it's the morning, I hope you have the best day of your life. Not being asleep, I guess, breathing in air and touching grass. And yeah, I hope if you're on spring break, you have such a wonderful, restful spring break. But yes, bye, and I'll see you in the future. Hopefully, I won't be on hiatus for that long again, but yeah. Okay, bye guys.